My last question of the episode is more so of what do you lose as a result of growth? And it's confidence, like knowing where things go, believing in yourself. That shit's out the door with growth and change and dealing with my recent mistakes and recent transgressions and everything. It's been eye-opening that things start to make sense. I learned more about myself, but that came at a cost. That hurts. It comes with resentment. It comes with more anger. It comes with all that. Hope I'm becoming a better person. I hope I'm being better for whoever, but it's not easy. Good listeners, Jeremiah and I here, Therapy House Season 2. You guys just wrapped up episode 1, our inaugural episode that we discussed growth. So, just like similar fashion with last season, we try to have these little editorial episodes at the tail end of our episodes, just to kind of wrap up the main points, or at least kind of what we took from it. Joining me today is John Tong, JT.
What up, peeps? I definitely think that there's some stuff to clean up, some stuff to add on, some stuff to just clarify, about talking about growth. One of those things that I really wanted to touch on was how growth wasn't only supposed to be measured, in career-wise.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sometimes the guys out here like to jock around, just like, well, when am I going to make that change? When am I going to leave? When am I going to follow something else? But I think what I was really trying to get at more was some of that relationship goals, some of that growth in relationships. I had asked Jeremy and Lou about, being fathers. And I mean, Jeremy's been practicing it for a hell of a lot longer, but Lou out here being the new father. And those are like natural transitions that I think a lot of people talk about in terms of relationships, where obviously you're now adding this other person, right? This little baby, this small person that's always looking up at you. But, I didn't have that recently. The growth that I was talking about was trying to build a home. And this home is pretty special with my partner because I felt like when I left the original chill house, which then became therapy house and all this, there was an element of I'm leaving my boys in order to go and team up with my partner. But the physical house itself was her house. It was her place. That was the place where she was at. So there was a lot of me having to fit my stuff over where she's at. But in this new space that we're carving out together, it's more about the relationship goal of now, how do we make this more our house?
So then how did that shift from, just Steph's goal or just your goal and eventually morph into ours?
Well, I think that part of it was natural. I mean, there were a lot of concessions that she had helped me with at the old spot, and, allowing me to use the studio, converted from the garage and things like that. But there still was an element of just, this, I'm in her space. And in this new spot, I think we both sort of looked at each other at one point and reflected on how, now we're doing this together. Now we're teaming up. It's not just about how do we fit John's stuff in here. How do we make it work? How do we mesh it with my stuff that's already here? No, now we're both taking all of our stuff and we have to carve out this new piece together. I look at it as like a canvas where, she had already had a painting and maybe I'm just adding a few strokes on the sides and maybe making my mark on it. But in this new spot, it's like, no, this is a blank canvas and she and I are both holding paintbrushes and both painting at the same time. And there's some areas where she's taking the lead and some areas where I'm taking the lead, but there is this more natural back and forth. And some of it is frustrating, obviously, like I did mention on the episode, but there's also growth that comes out of those frustrations. There's growth that comes out of conflict. There's growth that comes out of just getting to that point where, you need to express yourself. And I feel like there were a lot of areas in which she was able to express herself and areas in which I was able to express myself in this new home. But more or less, we're making it our home together. And this is also a new home that we're providing for the kids and all that stuff too. So it's really nice to know that we're now reached this new phase in the relationship where we can sort of say like, hey, this is our first home. It's not just like in the movies when you see like that married couple in the movie where they just jump ahead and like, this is the first place that they rent together or they buy together, right? Well, in real life, for those that know what the Bay Area housing market looks like and all that, it ain't a little realistic out here to go out and completely buy a new home. But this place now feels like our home. This place feels like this is now our first place together.
Right.
And I think that that's a huge marker. And in providing things for the kids, we were also doing things that weren't just for ourselves or weren't just trying to make things fit, but just trying to have a shared vision together and how we can now take the next steps in our relationship. And I think that was something that was frustrating, but also beautiful at the same time, just to kind of keep up with the same theme. But growth is hard. And, I know that we're going to transition into other sides, but I think as part of the editorial, at some point, I did also want to talk about how do we deal with growth? How do we deal with these challenges? Because growth is challenging. And I think we celebrated growth a lot in the first episode, but we didn't get to talk a lot about how do we deal with the growth.
Yeah, I think reflecting back on it as a producer of the episode, I felt like we hit all the marks. I felt like we hit definitely a piece of how we all defined it, what it looked like, some of the things that, how do we kind of continue to grow, how we felt like, even though we're in the same spot, how do we, remain continuing to grow and not, content with stagnation. I think one of the pieces we can also revisit is just the whole piece of, do you lose something with growth? But we also, we didn't cover something of like being in sequence with someone else and growing with our partners and growing with, we wish that Lou and Jeremy, elaborate a little bit more on growing with, having daughters and the shift and the impact that lays on their lives now, or just imprint of which they kind of discuss a little bit more.
And we've had elements on the show of that. I mean, I think Jorge, even in the first season, was one of the first of us that actually talked a lot about relationship growth. So this isn't exactly a new topic, but as we got back together,
a new facet, a new piece. Because we don't have daughters. Well, John, you do.
Stepdaughter. That's
Stepdaughter.
right.
So at least then that comes with other nuances of itself. But yeah, to the same point, growth is still growth. It's not always easy. It doesn't look super great. And so then, let's open up with your question then, John.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Maya, a little bit about just how do you deal with growth? Because, there was something in the episode that talked about like, how do we push forward, right? Like, how do we move forward, and there was that theme of like, are you stagnant or are you growing? And at least the way that I was seeing it in trying to practice more Zen and trying to practice more of being rather than doing, something that wasn't exactly 100% clear was my idea of measured growth. Because I think that I do try to move forward and make that move or do that move in certain areas. I just need to practice being in other areas at the same time. And so, it goes back to some of that old school philosophy of like, are you type A or are you type B? Like, what personality type are you?
Right.
Type A is like super ambitious because they're very goal oriented and task oriented and they have things outlined and they get frustrated when it doesn't work out. In reality, there are actually a ton of type B personality people out there that are just as equally ambitious, but it just looks differently.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can even say that about growth. I mean, what is all growth always forward? And then it could be lateral. It can be, backwards sometimes. And a lot of which can grow in many different directions. There's some pieces where some days you will grow an inch, and other days you'll grow millimeters, and
You get
you
that
know,
growth spurt.
yeah. Or just like plants, you may not grow taller or bigger, but it's more of like thicker, more sturdier, and more stable. So some of those pieces are just, how we're defining it, how you define it. Is that faulty, or is that kind of pressured, or is it natural? Or are you getting BBLs with your growth?
I think that it's just all around. I mean, I think I was looking at the other day on my hands that I have some calluses actually growing on my hands, and that comes from actually doing a lot of the physical labor on the house and scraping them, rubbing them, getting injured. I mean, I fell off a ladder at one point. There is a lot of growth that
Yeah.
way. And then things where you look back and like, okay, maybe I should have placed my foot here, or not, maybe not overreach, or whatever you want to call it, and those are very physical signs of growth. But especially even when I thought about the relationship growth, like there's that inner growth, how I'm growing as my own individual, but I'm also growing with my partner. And then at the same time, people have different styles of dealing with change and dealing with growth and dealing with challenges. I hark back onto the Zen route that has often helped me grow. And with Zen, there is just an emphasis on introspection and questioning. And some people think of it as like, oh, isn't Zen like part of a spirituality, or Zen just, a bunch of philosophy and questions? But in reality, Zen isn't just that eternally chill person.
Mm-hmm.
It is a practice of being. And so in that sense, I mean, you can make the argument that you are doing something, but that doing doesn't look like doing to many people.
Right.
It looks like you're just being. And a lot of people don't understand that being is very effortful.
Mm.
And I think that's where I sometimes get the question or get joked around by you guys out here. Is like, John, are you doing something? Are you growing? Like,
what? Are you growing right now?
Yeah, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm practicing being right now. I'm practicing being here in this moment. Like, there's a level of intentionality of being in the moment that also allows me to introspect at a deeper level. And that's something that helps me keep my cool, keep my balance along this measured growth in different domains. Because I personally, I think I would freak out if I tried to do too many domains at the same time.
Right. A lot goes into how you define growth. People define it as like intentionally. But in a sense, it definitely does feel like growth is just you're always growing by the minute, by the second, not just older, but
And maybe that brings up how we measure growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people measure growth because you reached a milestone. Oh, you now you grew. Like, now we saw you
put in
change.
the effort, the energy to move from one place to another. No, like we could be always moving forward. This could be a never-ending escalator of us just kind of moving through our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Many of which are some people see failure as a biggest threat to their growth. And many times failure is often the best teacher.
I think that, two of the best speeches that I've heard about trying to deal with challenges in a long time were Nick Foles' post Super Bowl speech and also Alex Smith's post recovery TED Talk. Just for people out there that don't fully know. I mean, we're not going to go into the full sports podcast out here, but Nick Foles was
sports
kind of stereotyped as a loser for a long time. He had some early success in football, but even broke a couple records, and then all of a sudden just fell off the face of the planet and went from being a starting quarterback to a backup quarterback to a third stringer to then not even being signed, like an afterthought, somebody that was too weak, too loose with the ball, too just everything that just made you question if this guy could ever even really be a starter again. And then lo and behold, as a backup, comes in and ends up winning the first Super Bowl ever for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm not even an Eagles fan, but I give props to Nick Foles in that his speech, he talked about how all those losses that he took, all those lumps that he took along the way, they changed who he was. And through those defeats, he was able to grow.
Right.
And I thought that was amazing because, a lot of times people talk about like, well, I want to thank my my daddy. I want to thank my coach. I want to thank my wife. I want to thank everybody's always thanking everybody. But Nick Foles was just so stern in that post game conference. And he legit just said, like, I want to thank my losses. You know, I want to thank these defeats that I had to take in order to get here to the summit. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't admit. We just look at failure and think that, oh, you just fell off. Like, you're not growing. You actually went backwards. But in his speech, he talked about how he had to move backwards in order to go forwards.
That shit is not easy. That's not easy to take that. I mean, even just thinking about it, or just in thinking about your previous losses, previous mistakes. I mean, I'm doing that as my own process and the recent mistakes that I've made. And that shit hurts. I mean, I think one of the questions, my last question of the episode was more so of what do you lose as a result of growth? And for that, even with mistakes, like, it's confidence, like knowing where things go, believing in yourself. That shit's out the door with growth and change. And so even with like dealing with my recent mistakes and recent transgressions and everything, it's been eye-opening to be in therapy, to talk about things, to kind of reflect on all the things that have happened, and to realize, like, wow, like, you know, this opens me up for this. This adds a new development to that things start to make sense. I learned more about myself, but that came at a cost. That hurts. It comes with resentment. It comes with more anger. It comes with all that. You know, hope I'm becoming a better person. I hope I'm being better for whoever is here, and my friends and my family, and I definitely feel like I'm becoming a better therapist, but it's not easy. It's not the loss of confidence, the loss of knowing where you're going, the loss of feeling good, and I guess comfort doesn't. And so I can see why, you know, we avoid it. We delay the transition. We delay asking for help or doing the right thing.
I think that's something I'd like to add on that one is the theme of sacrifice. I think that, you know, again, how do you measure growth? How do you measure loss? And there can be growth through loss. There can also be loss through growth. And these things are sort of what blend together as part of, you know, the yin and yang, you know, and all that, where, you know, you can't have everything perfect and black and white. You know, there's a little bit of good in the evil, and there's a little bit of evil in the good. Like, there is a blend. And I think that sometimes sacrifices are part of those decisions that we make along the way. And some of them are unintentional, right? And maybe could even be traumatic. But then there's also some of those sacrifices that are intentional, these things that you do give up along the way in order to push towards growth.
But there's an issue with the word sacrifice. Sacrifice is infers or implies that, you know, like, hey, I'm giving up this for this. Suffering is just like, I'm going through this. I'm giving up this for not knowing how come. And so why am I going through this? So that's where it's like, with growth, you don't always know something else is going to come back in return. You just know, I'm giving this up. I'm jumping in. I have no clue what's happening or what's going to happen next. Whatever comes.
And maybe that's where
the fear comes, or?
Well, I was going to say that maybe that's where just the theme of growth sounded a lot more positive when we were recording all of us together, because growth is often synonymous with something positive, something in the right direction.
Right.
But as we mentioned earlier, there can be growth in a whole bunch of different ways. And so maybe part of growth is also just changing the language to focus on the word change rather than growth. Wherever you are at in life, whether you're moving up, you're moving down, you're moving laterally, it's a change, and you're adjusting to those transitions. We could use the word change. We could use the word transition. When you imply the word growth, it is sort of assuming that it's something positive.
Right. In the end, it is. I think that's the piece. There's a fine line of, there's changed. There's, you know, things being different. We're in a transition period. Everybody's not comfortable. You're still learning things. You're still trying to perfect stuff. The confidence isn't there. And then when you look back, it's, wow, I'm really grateful for these pieces, these people, and reflecting back of like, okay, it was not easy, did not feel good. I didn't know what was happening, and now I'm here, and I would do it all again.
Just to finish off this episode, I like a little mantra out there, and just that, just as there is growth, there is also an acceptance of change. Right. So y'all can look forward to more on this season of Therapy House. We're going to be coming back with more episodes. We're going to be reflecting more during the episodes, post episodes like this editorial. But Therapy House is here to stay. We're moving forward, and we hope that all y'all excited for these next topics coming up.
Exactly. Got lots in store. Been marinating on a lot of things, pushing each other to go deeper, and we'll have guests this season. So, but yeah, this is another episode of Therapy House Editorial. Nice, short, and sweet, just like the other episodes. So tune in to these. Tune in to the previous ones, because, you know, those are still fire. Until next time.
Therapy House.
Peace.